So to start with our Scrum overview, we're going to cover three main categories. We're going to talk about roles, artifacts, and events. I also want to point out that there's plenty of times I might bring up something that's not true Scrum, and I'm going to try to identify that with a little asterisk in the corner. These are things that may not be in the Scrum Guide, which is the authoritative location for information about the Scrum process by Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland, but these are things that in just my practice and day-to-day life, I know you need to make something successful. But I want to call it out for you, just so you know. When we first start talking about roles in Scrum, you have to talk about a concept called pigs and chickens. This comes from an adage about a pig and a chicken are walking down the street. Then the chicken turns to the pig and says, "Hey, why don't we start a restaurant?" The pig goes, "Well, what do you want to call it?" He goes, "Let's call it Bacon and Eggs." And the pig goes, "I don't think so, because I'm fully committed, but you're only involved." This is used to represent the fact that managers, stakeholders, to an extent sometimes your customers, are not involved in the actual making of software. They definitely have input into the process, and we have to listen to them. We have to make sure we are basing our decisions on their information, but they actually don't write the code. They don't create the deliverables. And we want to separate that out because there are times when you need to let the people who do that work. There's often times where they'll mention that this is a pig meeting or a chicken meeting, meaning that in this meeting the pigs are only allowed to talk, and in this meeting the chickens are allowed to talk. I do want you to be careful, though, that you don't make it pig versus chickens. This is supposed to separate the people doing the work, but it doesn't need to become an us versus them. But it's an adage that's used multiple times in any type of thing you talk about with Scrum, so I wanted to bring it up. The first role I want to talk about is the product owner. And although all roles are supposed to be made equal, this is one of the most important ones. This person maximizes the product value. That is their responsibility. We want to make sure whatever we're producing is going to add value to our customers and add value to us as a company. They also manage the product backlog. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later, but it is the single source of requirements. It's their job to make sure that that is well formed, and even if they're not doing it themselves, they are responsible for it. They're also a representation for the user. So if the clients have concerns, they have enhancements, they have requirements, that is conveyed to the product owner through many different methods, and it's their responsibility to make sure that is reflected back in that product backlog. And they're also a single person. It's not a committee. And this is often hard. When we talk about what the product owner does later on in these lessons, you're going to see they do a lot of things. They're doing things like helping determine what's in the product, helping determine what's going to be in the product in the future based on marketing, acting as a leadership role, working with requirements and clarifications. It's hard to find somebody who can do all of those things. So you may have to have some help, but there still needs to be one single wringable neck of a person who can make these decisions. Let's talk about finding a good product owner. We just talked about a lot of things that a product owner does. They're helping the team clarify requirements, managing that backlog, looking at the market and seeing where we need to be in the future, acting in a leadership role, and making go, no-go decisions for what goes in and out of a release. That's a lot to ask one person to do. A lot of skill sets to go into that. So you want to find somebody who can fill as many of those as possible, and what they can't do, fill it in with a team that can help them out. One person needs to be the single wringable neck and make those decisions. I've been asked by a VP before, where do I find good product owners? Do I get those from the PMO office, from product management, from business analyst? You find good product owners in Product Ownerville. There is no secret place to find them. If you go and just rebrand somebody, you're going to have a hard time making sure they fit all those roles. BAs, for example. I've seen it where they'll come in and say, all the BAs are now product owners. But business analysts usually don't have the power to make go, no-go decisions. They don't have the ability to go up against VPs and other stakeholders and say, you're not going to get this and we're going to do this. They're not exposed to marketing a lot of the times to make informed decisions of what goes in and out. And so they're often paper tigers, and they don't have the ability to actually execute on that role. Product management is the same thing. Just they don't have as much delivery experience. So they concentrate on features that they think are going to make their clients happy, but they don't think about technical debt. They don't think about bugs, and they're not involved in the day-to-day as much. So you may have to find one or the other and augment them from one side or the other. Just don't try to go rebrand an entire group of people into this role. The next role I want to talk about is the role of Scrum Master. This is often confused with a project manager from the previous methodologies in Waterfall. but it's a little bit different. A Scrum Master is a shepherd of Scrum, a steward of the process. They're supposed to know the process and understand its values and its principles and be able to implement those mechanisms we talked about. And if those mechanisms aren't working, help the team find the right mechanisms. They are the guardian to make sure we are adhering to all those values. They're also a servant leader to the team, meaning they are supposed to serve the team, not the other way around. If the team needs something, Scrum Master should be there to help. If the team needs some education, they need some guidance, the Scrum Master is there to help them get to that point, but not tell them how to do it. A servant leader. They also remove impediments. If there's something such as software they don't have, a server's down, they can't get information from marketing on time, or anything that might affect their ability to deliver their goals, that's something that the Scrum Master should maintain. And even though they might have something actually done by another party or a delegate, they're the ones responsible for making sure these things get resolved so the team can get back to working smoothly. They also resolve conflict within the team. You'd like to think that everybody's going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but these are personalities we're talking about, and there's always going to be conflict. So a Scrum Master also has to have some soft skills and to be able to resolve these conflicts, help the teams resolve them themselves, and get that team back to a very good place and to be able to work together. So we just talked about the Scrum Master, and you might be tempted to say, that sounds a lot like a project manager, but there is a big difference. Project managers are more traditionally command and control. I have a plan, I tell people how to execute that plan, I make them report back to me on that plan. That's not what a Scrum Master is about. They're about empowering the team themselves to do a lot of those activities on their own. So you're not reporting to the Scrum Master, they're not responsible for your timeline, they're just making sure you follow the rules that make you do that transparently. Often when we take project managers and we make them Scrum Masters, they're going to tend to have these old habits. Not that that's necessarily bad, especially with a new Scrum team, there might be a transition period, but they have to be able to grow into that servant leader we talked about. So be careful of just taking all your project managers and rebranding them as Scrum Masters. It's a different thing. Also, I've seen functional managers be made Scrum Masters. That's also difficult because if I'm on a team and I report to you as a functional manager, I kind of feel I report to you as my Scrum Master too. And it's very hard for you to take off that hat and say, I'm now speaking as your Scrum Master. You're always speaking as my functional manager too. It's not that easy. The other tendency is to actually make team leads into Scrum Masters. Not a bad idea. They already have kind of a leadership role. They don't really have responsibility for these people, so they can be a servant leader. And they know a little bit about the technology and can help out with those impediments. The problem can come in what I experienced. I was a Scrum Master and a team lead. We had a great product owner, things were going great. Then our product owner left and we got a product owner who wasn't that great. And I had to end up coaching them a lot more on the process. And it became so intensive that I was starting to lack on my duties as a developer. Eventually having to tell the team, don't count me in on our velocity because I can't be sure of how much I can actually commit. It really depends on your team and how much they actually rely on that Scrum Master. A more mature team and a good team lead who can act as that servant leader is perfect. If it's a less mature team and that person has a hard time balancing their development responsibilities with the Scrum Master, then you might need to look at an external source. Also, whether you have a Scrum Master that's dedicated to one team or multiple teams comes up a lot. In the beginning, usually good to have a 1-to-1 ratio for immature teams. As they mature, perfectly fine to have a Scrum Master who's going over multiple teams because they're more self-resilient and they don't need the Scrum Master's interaction as much. The third role in Scrum is the development team. Now notice I didn't say the QA team or the developers or the BAs. Everyone is developing something, so everybody is a developer. They're all part of the same team. And they don't really have those titles inside of Scrum. You'll still have that title as far as HR. You still will be an architect or a QA specialist or an engineering third grade. Whatever you have that is in your hierarchy. But once you're on that team, all those titles disappear and you are concentrated on the team's goal and working as a team. And that might mean trade-offs in working collaboratively and helping out in different areas. And in that respect, these teams are cross-functional. They need to have everybody on the team that can do what needs to be done to deliver the product increment. If you need user interface design, you need a UX person on the team. You need development, you need a developer. If you need BAs, etc., etc. All the people you need in these different disciplines on that team to be able to produce a product increment. They're also self-organizing. We talked about this previously in the concepts about self-managing teams. This team should be able to, within themselves, be able to decide what they're going to work on, how they're going to work on it, come up with designs, and actually implement and deliver the product increment without a lot of external guidance. The Scrum development team is also highly collaborative, meaning that they're dealing with each other day in and day out and helping out with each other's processes. So if a tester needs some help, the developer will help them. If we're having a design problem, we might bring in some of the testers and the BAs to help out with that as well. It's the difference between collaborative and cooperative. Cooperative means we all do our separate things and judge ourselves differently to reach the same goal. Collaborative is we have the same goal and we might give up some of our own responsibilities and take on some other responsibilities and share those so that we can reach that goal. And that'll become very important later on when we talk about actually executing a sprint. Also, these teams are small, 5 to 9 members. You don't want to have too many people because then it becomes much more of an administrative overhead. Too little people becomes too small to actually implement this type of overhead. So a typical size is somewhere between that 5 or 9 members.